look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. And don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Oh, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp at timeforhemp.com, Tumblr, SoundCloud, YouTube, and of course, iHeartRadio. We've also got a Google Plus app that you can find in the Google Plus store and download into your smartphones and tablets, as well as other apps can be downloaded from Spreaker and Tumblr and SoundCloud so that you can stay connected to the Time for Hemp broadcasting network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is Monday, and on Monday we put a spotlight on the healthy things that this wonderful plant known as cannabis can do for our body, spirit, and mind. And we like to tip our hats to the professionals that are found at Patients Out of Time, an organization founded by Lynn, Mathre, and Byrne. And we want to say thank you to them for all their hard work and let them know how grateful we are for being part of our family here on the Time for Hemp family. And my joint host today is Byrne, and he'll be joined later by Lynn Mathre. And I'll let him introduce our joint guest, Mike Cutler, here on the big broadcast at Time for Hemp. Al?
Well, thank you, Casper. Nice things you always say about us, and I appreciate that. And we're going to be along a little bit. And you've already let the cat out of the bag. You know who's coming. It's Mike Cutler. We'll bring light on in just a moment. But what you're listening to is Patients Out of Time's show on Time for Hemp. We do this twice a week. We talk about only cannabis issues. On Sundays, we try to concentrate on veterans in cannabis. We also have been known for the last 2 years to bring on cannabis experts from around the world to discuss their particular expertise as it relates to the cannabis plant. And keep in mind, as we talk today, when we say cannabis, you might be more familiar with the term marijuana, but the correct term is cannabis when you talk about it as medicine especially. And cannabis is not a drug. Cannabis is a plant. It grows in the ground. Drugs don't grow in the ground, but plants do. And actually, the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia in 2014 declared the cannabis plant an herb, a medicinal herb, an herb. So it's a plant, it grows in the ground, and keep that in mind as we go through this. If you want information about Patients Out of Time, please go to www.medicalcannabis.com, and I'll drop the W's. Also, you can go to patientsoutofTime.org. We are an educational company. We've been in business 20 years. We're a corporation of the state of Virginia, and we do online as well as in-your-face kind of cannabis education. Our online cannabis education address is www.themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. Here, your doctor, nurse, pharmacist, other healthcare professional can take online courses about the therapeutic uses, applications of cannabis, about the endocannabinoid system, and for a small fee receive their CME credits, which are educational credits that healthcare professionals need to bolster their education every year, usually by state mandate. But today we're going to go and slant a little different than we usually do. We're not going to talk about the therapeutic cannabis issues as much as we're going to talk about how the law affects cannabis and patients. And to do that, as Casper said, we have as our guest today Mike Cutler, an attorney from Massachusetts, who I've known from his work for decades. I think Mike has been in this. So let's say hi, Mike.
Hi, good to be with you. As always, you and Mary Lynn are truly heroes of mine, and much of the knowledge that I have to display is a result of what I've learned through my work with patients out at time. And you've been kind enough to have me address the last two conferences, and I am pleased to be with you this afternoon.
Well, thanks. Again, we like applause just like everybody else, and appreciate it. Mike, I usually like to start everybody, the listeners off here, by the way, Mike, are all over the world. We've got about 2.5 million people listening to us on average, and they're everywhere. So if you could give them a brief description of your background, how you got interested in law, where'd you go to school, where do you live, all those things, and then we'll get into the cannabis issue.
Well, I'm based, Al, in Northampton, Massachusetts, although I lived in Boston for 30 years, and I have a presence in both cities. But I'm primarily based in Northampton, college town, about 100 miles due west of Boston, here in the happy Pioneer Valley. I've been a lawyer for, I have to concede, more than 40 years, and although my original work was in on the criminal side, I have also had a civil practice, and these days my work essentially concerns, on the criminal side, representing state prisoners accused of murder in post-conviction cases. I also work with mental health law. I help train mental health lawyers to do guardianship and civil commitment proceedings for patients, and otherwise help with anti-discrimination matters for people with mental illness in Massachusetts, and particularly in my county and the next county over, as a contractor to the public defender in both of those two capacities. But my third hat is as a advocate for marijuana reform and representing vendors to the new marijuana industry, as it is birthing nationally in general, and in particular in Massachusetts. So in that regard, my background is one of ending prohibition, protecting patients' rights, and seeing to it that as the process evolves in terms of legislation within the states and in terms of our interaction with the federal government, that we follow the science towards a better policy that not only protects the public health far better than prohibition does, but ends the racially discriminatory impact of prohibition laws, both marijuana and other controlled substances. People say that the prohibition laws don't work because it's so unenforceable and drugs are just as available as they've always been. And that misses the point that virtually all anti-drug bills, including marijuana bills, were initially and explicitly designed to have a punitive effect on racial minorities. And to that extent, our marijuana laws and our other prohibition laws have been successful in achieving their objective, which is subjugating racial minorities.
That's quite a statement, Mike. I don't know that you'd ever. How can you verify that these laws were done with a specific intent to go after minorities, racial minorities, or others?
Well, there are a number of social policy treatises that have been published in any number of professional journals that make this point, but I will do it with two references. The first is that the very first law in the United States that dealt with drugs was a law in San Francisco that made the possession of opium by Chinese Americans or by Chinese nationals illegal. it was explicitly racial. And the second is two law professors at the University of Virginia in 1973, Professors Bonney and Whitebread, did a very famous, often cited treatise for the Virginia Law Review, in which they explicitly went out and collected the legislative documents of every single state's marijuana law, and every single state's legislative documents about the reasoning for the adoption of these laws had to explicitly mentioned either African Americans or Mexicans as part of the motivating feature for these laws. So between the historical data and the data collected by our own federal government, the Bureau of Justice Statistics within the Department of Justice, and the FBI data monitoring process as well, despite the fact that racial groups use illegal drugs in equal amounts, and certain drugs are used even more by whites than by non-whites, the subjective process of arresting and convicting racial groups shows that black Americans and Hispanic Americans are arrested at anywhere from 4 to 6 times the rate of white Americans for their drug usage. So that from those indisputable sources, I derived my thesis that drug laws are directed at oppressing racial minorities rather than protecting the public health.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Professor Bonney, because Richard Bonney is and has been since our inception on our board of advisors, and he is still a professor emeritus or working professor at the University of the Law School here in Charlottesville. And I'll just point out to the folks, Dr. Bonney and a now deceased other attorney named Whitebread, Bonney and Whitebread, wrote a book called The Marijuana Conviction in the mid-'70s, which was published by the University of Virginia Press. And if anybody's interested in the deep history that Mike Cutler is referring to, they should read that book. It's an essential background book for anybody interested in prohibition, especially cannabis prohibition. Well, Mike, you can tell by my accent that I was born and raised in Massachusetts. My grandson and my daughter still live up there. My son is in Rhode Island, so we're sort of close.
Well, Al, I would only note that as far as my ears are concerned, you don't have an accent. But go ahead.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah, I hear that. Listen, let's start with Massachusetts. This is my home state. I still have property up there. I have a family up there. I'm interested in the state. I have always been rather proud of Massachusetts in that it has always seemed to me, at least in the New England area or New York area, to be a leader of civil rights. And I know that Massachusetts has a law about cannabis and medical cannabis, but please tell the listeners what those laws are, and then we'll go into if they work or not.
Well, Massachusetts, fortunately for reform-minded people, is an initiative state. a little fewer than half of the states in the United States give voters the ability to pass binding laws, notwithstanding inaction by the legislature and the governor. So despite years of non-binding public opinion polls and questions that we are allowed to run on a non-binding basis in local rep districts and Senate districts, despite a decade of such advisory non-binding bills, non-binding public policy questions showing uniform support for marijuana reform, in 2008 we were able, through some political activist funders, to have an initiative for decriminalizing marijuana, meaning that possession of an ounce or less became a civil infraction rather than the basis of an arrest or a sentence. That law has been in effect since 2009, and the sky has not fallen in Massachusetts, I'm here to report. I will say, however, that the FBI data that I mentioned before about how drug laws were enforced tells us that in the 6 years since decriminalization, the non-decriminalized marijuana offenses of cultivation and distribution have continued to be enforced against minority populations at a rate 4 to 5 times the rate that it's being enforced against the white population. So we see with decrim that although the primary problem of giving people criminal records for simple possession has ended in Massachusetts, the criminal enforcement of the other aspects of marijuana law continues in a racially discriminatory manner unabated. In 2012, we were fortunate enough to have funding for an initiative to adopt medical marijuana, to not only decriminalize that process, but to create a immunity for patients with doctor certifications to possess and, until our dispensaries became open, cultivate on their own or through caregivers a supply of medical cannabis. I should say that in 2008, the decrim campaign, we have 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts. The decrim initiative passed in all but 2 of those 351 cities and towns, and medical passed in all but 1 of those towns, to show the breadth of the support for these reform measures statewide in Massachusetts. And both times, incidentally, these initiatives got more votes than President Obama. So we're talking about some major support, and this has been in the teeth of the opposition of every single elected statewide leader. So the people have spoken eloquently on that, and we are right now in the process. I'm on the committee of people drafting a non-medical full adult legalization initiative that will run in 2016. The language for this initiative, however, needs to be submitted by August 5th of this year. And I think in the next month we will see how that process plays out. I can tell you that one of the priorities that I have in the drafting process is the protection of patient rights within a so-called recreational full adult system. We're seeing some tension between patient rights and the so-called recreational market in states like Washington State, where there are concerns about patient access. And it's my objective within the state initiative drafting process that there be some significant protections. I believe that under existing state disability anti-discrimination law, patients, medical marijuana patients, are protected against discrimination for their choice of medicine. That issue is actually being litigated in the Massachusetts courts right now. I would hope that an initiative provision could make that protection explicit so that we wouldn't need the guidance of the court process, that we would have it right there in the midst of the statutes, that the anti-disability protections explicitly extend to medical marijuana patients. I'd also like to see anti-discrimination equity provisions for non-medical users, to establish that they not be discriminated against any more than tobacco or alcohol users are treated. But in terms of what the bill is going to look like, it's in the drafting stages, and we'll know more in a month. Okay, we're going to have to take a break here in a minute. I wish Virginia had that initiative process like Massachusetts and Florida and other states. It seems to me that, I'm a citizen, and I try to influence my legislators about medical cannabis, but most of them are on the stones, and they don't want to listen. They do not want to learn. I consider the initiatives process to be a laxative for legislative constipation. All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll give it to Casper here for a few minutes. Come back and listen to Mike Cutler here in a few minutes, folks.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom. This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom fighters. What we require, souls on fire.
More fire, more fire, more fire, fire.
Freedom fighters, what we require, rebels fire.
More fire, more fire, more fire, fire.
What are we doing with a word like this? The act of Noah was already a sign, a warning of Jah, destroy the evil mind. Jah, don't let it happen again. We already got us a second chance. We have to take it with the lights in our hands. We only live once, we must make it better. Global freedom and peace is the answer.
This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom. This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom fighters. What we require, souls on fire.
More fire, more fire, more fire, fire.
Freedom fighters, what we require, rebels fire.
More fire, more fire, more fire, fire.
We have to stop the killing and fighting. All over the world people are dying. Children are hungry and always crying. Oh Mama Africa. Some people over the world searching for solution, but Diablo always showing the cross out of war. While using bombs and bullets wasted for self-destruction of our own human species.
This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom. This is a message of a world in war. This is a message of a world in pain. This is a message to our global leaders. This is a message, a cry out for freedom fighters. What we require, souls on fire.
More fire, more fire, more fire, fire.
Freedom fighters, what we require, rebels fire.
That's the Rough Star family singing Freedom Fighters, and that's what we are here at the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Used to be just one show a day, 1 hour, Time for Hemp, and that was on American Freedom Radio, and American Freedom Radio suffered major loss when the owner was arrested in Texas for transporting marijuana, medical marijuana. And Time for Hemp had to struggle to find its own way. And what we found along the way was a lot of new listeners and We became a station on iHeartRadio, and now we're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a team of people dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. And like a good joint, Time for Hemp is always best when shared with friends. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint conversation back over to my joint host here on Time for Hemp.
Well, Mike Cutler is certainly a freedom fighter. There's no doubt about that. But because of my background, Mike, and because of where you are, we're going to stay with Massachusetts. We had the listening audience should know that we have a chance to chat while the advertisements are going on. And what I'd like to bring up is something I bring up all the time, Mike, but it might be new to you, but it's probably an old song to the people here. But it seems to me that in Massachusetts and in other states around this country, the legislators, I understand that their job is to make laws, but it also seems to me that they're breaking the law. And the law that it seems to me they're breaking, at least when I was a kid there, this was a law, was that in the state of Massachusetts, you could not practice medicine without a license. And I always thought of practicing medicine as diagnosing, doing physical exams, doing operations, being a medical examiner, researcher. That would be practicing medicine. And that would mean that you had to go to school. You know, you went to college, then you went to med school, then you did residency, and you did internship, and you spent years trying to figure out how to help the human body. And it appears to me in Massachusetts that none of the people making medical marijuana laws, medical cannabis laws, have had that experience of education. So wouldn't that mean they're breaking the law?
Well, without a license.
Practicing medicine without a license.
That is a criminal process, criminal conduct, but I would say that a politician's first job is not to legislate. A politician's first job is to get reelected. And in that context, what most politicians do rather than practice medicine is practice the avoidance of controversial subject matter and topics. And the one thing in my experience that has been uniform among politicians when the subject of marijuana comes up is that they want to change the subject rather than confront the issue. The legislators have never legislated medical marijuana. Medical marijuana came about after statewide, after numerous public policy questions in various parts of the state, all passed unanimously after public polling showed support for medical marijuana exceeding 60%. Only after an initiative did the law come onto the books, and the legislators have been sniping about it and concerned about it and moaning about it, but not really doing anything about it other than allowing the process to unroll. The unrolling of the process has been about as abysmal as it could be. The governor was our last governor under whom the initiative passed and under whose agency the law was implemented. That governor was dead set against this law before it was adopted and has been interfering with it. His interference has been documented in at least one successful lawsuit by someone who had their provisional license rescinded. And we are here talking nearly 3 years after the implementation of our law, and we bordered here in Massachusetts, Connecticut, which moved from the adoption of its medical marijuana to the opening of its first dispensary, and I want to say about 9 months. And we are nearly 3 years in, and our first dispensary has not opened yet, despite the fact that the law called for upwards to 35 dispensaries to be opened across the state within the first year of the enactment of the law. We are standing here today with only 3 licensees having been given permission to begin cultivating, and approximately 11 other provisional licensees having been given the permission to do their build-out, so that we are still several months away from the first dispensary being open for business, and to give you a sense of the pent-up demand, at least one of those dispensaries is only accepting patient consumer purchases by appointment, so that they don't have lines out the door. The process of selecting people to operate dispensaries has been one of obfuscation, of political cronyism, and of administrative ineptitude that hopefully will change under a new governor and a new commissioner of Public Health, the agency that oversees the program. And there is even today a meeting at the Department of Public Health to try to expand and fast track more dispensaries into the medical marijuana market. But it remains to be seen whether this is lip service by a new governor or actual change to new entrants being given the permission to go forward. Remains to be seen. That's the status of medical marijuana today. The other problem being, of course, law enforcement. There are many people in law enforcement who do not accept the viability, the enforceability, the legal effect of the new law, and in many cities and towns across the Commonwealth, protected patient home cultivation medical supplies have been confiscated, notwithstanding the legal protection that those patients have on paper. It's one thing to have those laws on the paper, but when the people with the guns come to your house and rip up your garden, that's the reality and not the law.
What's the Massachusetts Medical Association? They must be all pissed off at these politicians, huh?
Well, quite the contrary. The Mass Medical Society, the Doctors Guild, was against the bill, was against the initiative before it was adopted, and they have maintained their opposition. Quite in contrast to them have been both the Massachusetts Nurses Association, which has been fully in support of the bill, of the initiative, and is seeking to expand beyond doctors to nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists the ability to also certify patients. I would also point out that the Rhode Island Medical Society has been strongly supportive of medical marijuana in our neighboring state of Rhode Island. So there is a contrast there to be drawn.
Well, the nurses, Mary Lynn will tell you, and she's with us now, will tell you that the nurses have been strong on this issue for really, I think, almost going on 20 years or something. I think I'm sure that the first Nurses Association that stepped up in the United States and said cannabis is a medicine and patients should have it was the Virginia nurses, and that happened in 1994. So, and the American Nurses Association has twice issued a paper saying that not only do they think medical cannabis is an absolute reality, but they think that they want every nurse in the United States to be educated about the medical uses of cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. So the only thing, could you give me an idea what the objection is from the Massachusetts doctors? What do they have against the plant other than their ignorance?
Three things, and I'll start with their ignorance. If they didn't get taught about the endocannabinoid system in medical school when they went through, it doesn't exist. Doctors have a requirement to keep up with the evolving standards in research and science in their practices, and they, because of the federal government's obstruction of medical research and the stigmatization of medical marijuana laws within the medical community, they have kept themselves willfully ignorant of the evolving research globally as well as within the United States, demonstrating the benefits of it. The second basis for their objection is sort of the limited role that the law gives to doctors. They are essentially binary decision makers. They either give you access or they don't give you access, and dosing is left to the patient and to people associated with dispensaries, and doctors don't like being in a sort of a second seat and leaving it to patients to figure out their own dosing. So that's, I think, the second reason for their objection to this law.
Well, it's pretty. That's pretty standard. I think you defined almost all of the negative medical state medical associations in the United States that have not looked at the world science, as you indicate, and essentially, I think, are advocating their responsibility to you, to lawyers, and to law enforcement. I don't understand it, except that you've explained it very well. If they're not in charge, they don't want anything to do with it. And we do know, as you pointed out, that of the 157 medical schools in the United States at this time, only one, which would be Temple University in Philadelphia, has a course taught to their aspiring MDs on the medical uses of cannabis and the endocannabinoid system. So even though we have 20 years of knowledge of the endocannabinoid system, even though cannabis is used in 27 countries around the world, our doctors and those people that educate these doctors prefer to remain ignorant of medical cannabis. So with that, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about how do we possibly, Mike, get the doctors in Massachusetts up to the speed of a fifth grader. How do we do that?
Talk to you.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
Well, I once had a bowl, good green reefer, a big fat Jones beef, much, much sweeter. Hide it, don't hide it. Hide it, don't hide it. Well, hide it, don't hide it. Hide it, don't hide it. Well, hide it, don't hide it. Fire up right now.
Yeah, fire up right now. Be loud, be proud. Come out of the closet. Let the whole world know that you do utilize medicinal marijuana, medical cannabis, and that so many other patients also need medical cannabis, and it's wrong for them to be considered criminal when they just need medication. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint conversation back to my joint host here on the big joint broadcast at Time for Hemp.
Thank you, Casper. This is Lynn Mathre, speaking for Patients Out of Time. That last song, or the ad for the seeds, it reminds everybody this is a plant. We can grow it from a seed. We can get medicine from cannabis, but the cannabis is a plant, and the idea that we all can't grow it is crazy. We want to talk a little bit about the medical professionals, but I wanted to ask Mike one other question. So the dispensaries are really slow at not their fault, but it's been a slow process to get the dispensaries open. And in the meantime, patients grow their own. So what happens? The dispensaries open up in the area. The patients then have to kind of say, okay, now we can't grow anymore and we have to buy it from the dispensary, or how's that going to work?
Well, the law says that the law says that a patient can apply for a hardship cultivation license. And by definition of the inoperability dispensary within the patient's county, that qualifies for a hardship license. Once the dispensaries open, those licenses, to the extent that they've been granted, and the dispensary and the state registration process for hardship licenses is as slow and non-functional as its dispensary licensing process. Once a dispensary opens in the county, allegedly that will be a basis for rescinding the hardship cultivation permits. Whether there's going to be law enforcement knocking at the doors of people who've registered with the state remains to be seen. We only have a partial remedy from prohibition with the medical laws, and requiring patients to rely only on a state licensed facility is not necessarily the best way of doing it. But having said that, the dispensaries are required to offer their medicine on a sliding scale financial indigency basis, and many of them are planning on setting up a system whereby some of the profit that they generate from patients who are not mass health eligible, our public medical insurance program, would be used to subsidize the costs of the mass health eligible patients. So there not only are supposed to be sliding scale rates based on the financial status of the patients, there's also supposed to be a delivery system so that people who are physically disabled can have have their medicine delivered to them.
Yeah, and then, you said, I understand physicians being leery, they can say yes or no on a recommendation for patients. So the dispensaries, do they have any requirements for their people working there to have an education about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system?
Well, that's an excellent question, Mary Lynn. As it happens, the DEA, when the process of the implementation of the law first came around, the DEA the Drug Enforcement Administration, the feds tried to chase any doctors who were associated with these programs away from these programs. It was the feds saying, well, you can have medical marijuana, but nobody with any medical expertise can be around to help the patients. The agency that's licensing the dispensaries to open, the Department of Public Health, has said that no one without some medical training can be involved in the process of advising patients. So the way the DPH is framing the program is that patients either walk in and take pot luck, if you'll forgive that pun, on choosing the right medicine, or there will be somebody on staff at the dispensary who will be in a position of having some medical knowledge and some medical marijuana knowledge. As we know, those are two very different things, and being able to combine those two sources of information to become a useful resource to patients seeking to figure out what's the best strain, what's the best dosage, what's the best delivery system to treat my particular debilitating condition. Hopefully there will be people on staff at the dispensaries. I know that the dispensary that is going to be opening in my hometown here in Northampton is very concerned about having medical educators on staff. And the medical education role, as I understand them to be planning on having it, is not only to help educate the patients that come into their dispensary, but it's also to try to do outreach to doctors in the community so that those doctors who are treating patients exclusively with patent medicines that may have dramatically harmful side effects understand that they have an option for their patients. They may not necessarily want to get into the business, these doctors, of certifying patients, but once the patient has a certification, it should be part of that patient's conversation with any doctor, particularly the doctors who follow them most closely, that they are medical cannabis patients, that they have conditions that are being alleviated by medical cannabis, and whether that treatment with the medical cannabis, how that influences their treatment with the other drugs that the doctor is using for the patient's overall condition.
Exactly, because if I put the other hat on that I've got with the American Cannabis Nurses Association, of course our we are basically patient advocates, and one major role for nurses is to educate patients about the safe use of their medication. And again, this is for the general public out there listening, how crazy these laws are. They act as though cannabis is radioactive with all the rules and regulations and restrictions on the plant, and then they kind of say, well, healthcare professionals, you can say yes or no, they can use it, but then then stop there. Because, we'd recommend that every dispensary at least has a nurse. Every patient deserves a nurse who will understand their health problems to then better decide what medication would work for them. And yet, because of the Schedule I status, you get that catch-22 of, can nurses have their license and still do something like that? So, we've got one of the safest medications out there, and we put these roadblocks in there, and you're left with patients who, might have a medical educator there, but who isn't necessarily a healthcare professional.
I missed it, Mike, but is there some provision or can there be made provision in Massachusetts that nurse practitioners, registered nurses, MDs, DOs, etc., pharmacists, must acquire education in order to be involved in this process? Would that be a help, a hindrance, a good idea, a bad idea?
Well, let me tell you what the status quo is with regard to who does it and what their education requirements are. But let me just jump off of one comment that Mary Lynn just made about people's licenses being at risk. I know we have talked about this before. There is a Supreme Court case based on the Oregon Right to Die law. That law, which has been in effect for, I want to say, 8 years now, something like that. When it first came into effect, the feds threatened doctors who cooperated with the Right to Die law, threatened them with losing their federal licenses to prescribe controlled substances. The U.S. Supreme Court said in no uncertain terms that doctors who practice state legal medicine are not at risk for having their federal licenses taken. The feds can revoke licenses for people who divert federally controlled medications and who do not practice good medical law. But the Supreme Court said unequivocally that what is a state medical practice that is lawful and appropriate is a matter of state law, not federal law. So doctors who follow state law, including state laws that define legal medical marijuana, based on this Right to Die case, should have no fear about the feds coming in based on their lawful state practices and jeopardizing their federal licenses. Clearly, the Supreme Court has said you can give as a doctor, without threatening your federal license, drugs that can kill you. So that would seem to create a pretty safe harbor for doctors practicing medical cannabis medicine with a substance that will help heal. Now let me move on to the credentialing process for who participates in the process in Massachusetts for medical marijuana. Right now it's limited to physicians and osteopaths. Those people have to take an accredited 2-hour course each year on medical marijuana. That's a course that I helped participate in the designing of, and it's available over the internet. And there are other trainings that go on that I'm also participating in with local medical groups, group practices, and I will continue to do that. And getting that outreach to doctors about the existence of the endocannabinoid system and its specific applications among a variety of illnesses is just part of the fundamental process of making these medical laws more workable and more available to more patients. There is some administrative activity to expand the the certification process to nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists. Out in the western part of the state where I am, patients have far more contact with nurse practitioners and physician's assistants than they do with physicians. So expanding that designation certification process for access to medical marijuana beyond the doctors and the osteopaths to nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists is a important innovation, an important reform that will also expand patient access to medical marijuana. That process is ongoing. I can't give you a timeline for that, but it's at least being considered.
Yeah, and that would be great. I know New Mexico had their law passed so that it was the healthcare provider which automatically included all those folks. And I'd say if it was the nurse practitioner, then it would be like same thing as physicians feel a little hamstrung if they can't be more specific about with the patient as to how to dose. Same thing with nurse practitioners. You'd want to give them information and lead them to a reputable source, etc. Well, anyway, with that in mind, the 2-hour course, and I think, wow, 2 hours. And as you know, if you've helped develop it, you only touch the tip of the iceberg there. And I guess that means I can put a plug in for Patients Out of Time that we're working with partnered with the Medical Cannabis Institute, and you can find that at the medicalcannabisinstitute.org, which is an online program for continuing education, and they've gotten courses from our conferences are available now online, so people, if you can't make it to the live conference, at least can get those continuing education credits online, and that's the goal, is to make it available, since it's still not taught in school, and as you said, all practicing healthcare professionals are responsible. I mean, that's a responsibility, I think, of any profession, that you continue your education. So for physicians, nurses, pharmacists, etc., once you graduate from school, it doesn't mean you stop learning. You've got to stay there and keep getting educated, and learning about the endocannabinoid system is basic if a physician or any other healthcare practitioner wants to recommend cannabis.
So, Mike, what do you hear in Massachusetts about the endocannabinoid system? I mean, we stress it all the time. Marilyn just did again. Did they even bring that part up? I mean, what's going on with that?
Well, we have a number of medical schools in Massachusetts, apart from our, Harvard Medical School, where Lester Grinspoon, a famous physician activist for many years, and one of the people that really elevated the public understanding of the research that was out there, the Harvard Medical School really treated him poorly, and have done, they promote themselves as the standard of excellence in medical training, and they do absolutely nothing about the endocannabinoid system, notwithstanding the fact that they had a full-time professor and now professor emeritus on their staff with knowledge of that metabolistic resource. We have the state medical school in Worcester has nothing in their curriculum about it. It's really up to these continuing education providers to disseminate this information, and it may just take the legalization of marijuana on a national scale to enable the research into this area to be so vibrant and so robust and so comprehensive that it can no longer be ignored. Massachusetts is not pioneering this process, this education, and it needs to pick up its game.
Quick question. We're going to have to quit in 3 minutes, Mike. I went to St. Sebastian School, what is now called St. Sebastian School in Needham, which is a really, really well-done educational bastion of knowledge and the guys that get out of there and do good things. It's a Catholic school, and I have been after them as a graduate of the school for years. the headmaster, the science director, anybody that would listen to me, to introduce the knowledge of the endocannabinoid system to their students, especially since their alumni chipped in and built and bought this magnificent science building that the school now has the advantage of having. But they don't want to know about the endocannabinoid system. Your medical people, your doctors want to know about the medical systems that we know about. Let me just, the final question before you go. Is there hope in Massachusetts for enlightenment, or should we go up and move on to another place?
Well, I can't conclude my remarks without giving enormous praise to the work that you and Mary Lynn have done through Patients at a Time to promote and expand knowledge of the research. You guys are the gold standard, and it's a privilege and an honor to work with you. As far as Massachusetts is concerned, I cannot be optimistic about their internal capacity to breach the barriers of a lack of research and the stigma that the society, the Mass Medical Society, continues to propagate. I can only hope, as I said before, that once national prohibition ends and federal obstruction to research falls by the wayside, that the level of research will develop to demonstrate what we all know, that this is one of the most therapeutic and safest therapeutic substances known to man, with a variety of applications, and that the sooner this knowledge is disseminated, the healthier our population will be.
Yeah, we'll be great. Listen, Mike, thanks for coming on. It was a very interesting guest, and of course, if Mary Lynn and I can personally help you in your cause up there, or Patients at a Time can, just call us up. You know the number. And folks, this is Patients at a Time. We're at www.medicalcannabis.com or patientsatatime.org. Our education is at themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. That's accredited education for pharmacists and doctors and DOs and RNs and anybody else that needs those kind of credentials. It's there, it's online, it's very inexpensive, and it's knowledge. And why anybody out there doesn't want knowledge is beyond me. But we offer it, and we hope you take advantage of it. For right now, this is Al Byrne for Patients at a Time. Take care.
And I want to remind people out there that we are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week broadcasting network and a group of people who are dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. Make it a point to tune us in. Find us on iHeartRadio. Get the Google Plus app to put into your smartphones and share us with your friends.
Money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our yeah.